Keanu Reeves sat alone in his small trailer just behind the massive glass building that hosted the biggest tech conference in the country. Outside, huge billboards flashed the faces of people everyone called geniuses, people who spoke in numbers and algorithms, people who changed the world with just a tweet. Tonight, Elon Musk was going to speak on stage about the future. But what nobody knew was that the producers had a plan to surprise the audience. They wanted to bring in a humble hero to question Elon in front of everyone. They chose Keanu, thinking he would just ask something polite and then smile for the cameras. They didn't know how wrong they were. Keanu leaned back in his chair, staring at a small piece of paper. It was something he had scribbled when he was riding the subway that morning. The words were simple but powerful. It said, "Don't confuse genius with kindness." He remembered the look in the old man's eyes when he had helped him onto the train. The man didn't know who Keanu was. He just said, "Thank you, young man. These people with money forget how to be kind." That moment stuck with Keanu like a splinter under his skin. Inside the building, thousands of people filled the seats, waiting to hear what Elon would say about the new project that promised to change how humans live. The lights were blinding, the music was loud, and the air smelled like fresh plastic and expensive perfume. In the green room, Elon laughed with his team. He looked tired but excited, as if the whole world was just another piece of software he could rewrite overnight. Keanu walked in quietly, nodding at the security guard who barely noticed him. He didn't wear a suit like everyone else. He wore his old black jeans and a simple gray shirt. His hair was tied back in a loose ponytail. His eyes held that calm sadness that made people trust him without even knowing why. One of the producers came up to him and whispered, "Remember, keep it light. We just want a friendly moment." Keanu nodded, but in his mind, the old man's voice echoed again. "These people forget how to be kind." The show began with loud applause. Cameras zoomed in on Elon as he walked onto the stage like a rock star. He spoke about Mars, about electric cars that could drive themselves, about tunnels under cities. People clapped and cheered. They didn't hear the words. They heard the future, the promise of escape from all the pain on Earth. Then the host came up and said, "We have a surprise, a man who needs no introduction, Keanu Reeves." The crowd went wild. People stood up, clapping. Phones flashed like tiny stars. Keanu walked onto the stage, looking out at a sea of faces, all waiting for him to say something sweet, something humble. He hugged Elon, who laughed and said, "What brings you here, Keanu? You're not building rockets now, are you?" Keanu smiled, but it wasn't his movie star smile. It was the quiet smile he gave when he was about to say something that might break a room open. "No rockets," he said softly into the mic. "But maybe we can talk about where we're going before we get there." Elon shifted, still grinning, but there was a flicker in his eyes, like he just realized this might not be a game. Keanu pulled out the piece of paper from his pocket. The audience leaned forward. There was something raw about that slip of paper in this world of holograms and screens. "I met a man today," Keanu said, his voice steady. "An old man. He told me people with money forget how to be kind. I've been thinking about that all day. Elon, do you think all this, the cars, the rockets, the robots, do you think it makes us kinder?" The question hung in the air, like a ghost nobody wanted to see. People shifted in their seats. Some looked at each other, unsure if they were supposed to clap or wait. Elon laughed, but it sounded thinner now. "Well, technology helps people. We make life easier, safer. I think that's kindness in a way." Keanu didn't blink. "But what happens when people get left behind? When your cars drive themselves, but the drivers lose their jobs? When your rockets take the rich to Mars, but the poor can't even pay rent on Earth?" A soft gasp spread through the crowd. The cameras caught Elon's face. For a second, the mask slipped, the charming genius replaced by a tired man who didn't want to answer questions. Like this on live TV, he cleared his throat, looking at the producers, who just stared back, frozen. Keanu stepped closer. His voice dropped, softer now, but it cut through the silence like a knife. "Elon, you have power. Real power. You can change the world. But do you ever stop to see the people who can't keep up? The ones who will never sit in a self-driving car or buy a ticket to Mars. Do you see them? Ellen's mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time that night, the stage lights didn't feel so bright. The audience didn't feel like fans anymore. They felt like witnesses. They saw two men standing there, but only one of them looked real. Keanu looked out at the crowd. His eyes glistened under the harsh lights. We all want to go somewhere better, but maybe we should fix where we are first. Maybe real genius is not just making new worlds, but saving the one we have. Maybe real kindness is seeing people as they are, not problems to be solved, but souls to be loved. The silence was so heavy it felt like the walls would crack. Then, slowly, people started clapping, not the loud, forced claps from before. This was different, a slow, honest clap that grew like a wave. Elon looked down, his hands trembling slightly. Keanu reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. He didn't smile for the cameras. He just stood there, a man who chose to speak when silence would have been easier. Backstage, the producers whispered into their headsets, wondering how to spin this. But out there, in the seats, a young girl wiped her tears. A father pulled his son closer. And somewhere in the darkness, the old man on the subway would have smiled if he could see this. One man reminding another that money and rockets mean nothing if you forget how to be kind. And as the lights dimmed, Keanu knew this was only the beginning. The real conversation was about to start, and he was ready for it. Ready to stand in front of the world and ask the questions no one wanted to answer. The echo of the slow, honest claps lingered in the hall long after the lights went down. When the cameras finally stopped rolling, Elon stood there for a moment, looking smaller than the man who had walked onto that stage. He tried to laugh it off with his team, but their eyes darted away, too busy pretending to check their phones. Only Keanu stayed by his side, his hands still resting lightly on Ellen's shoulder as if he wanted to remind him that the truth, no matter how heavy, was better than a lie that kept you comfortable. Backstage, the producers were already arguing. In low voices, they didn't expect this. They thought Keanu would be sweet, harmless, the quiet celebrity who would nod and smile and give Elon a chance to look wise and funny in front of the whole world. Instead, they got something raw, real, something they couldn't polish up in the editing room. They didn't know whether to be angry or grateful. Keanu stepped into the hallway, his boots echoing on the marble floor. He felt the eyes on him, interns peeking from behind doors, security guards nodding at him with something close to respect. He didn't care about the buzz or the half-hidden smiles. His mind was far away, back on that piece of paper still, crumpled in his pocket, back to that old man on the subway who spoke the truth with no audience to clap for him. Elon followed behind, a few steps back. He kept looking at Keanu like he wanted to say something, but the words got stuck in his throat. He wasn't used to being questioned. For years, he had been the one with the answers. The man who tweeted jokes that millions liked in seconds, who broke things just to build them better. But tonight, something cracked inside him. A small crack, but deep enough to let the cold air in outside. The night was warm, but the wind carried the city's secrets. Keanu lit a cigarette, the soft orange glow lighting up the edges of his tired face. He didn't really smoke. It was just a habit that calmed his hands when his mind was racing. Elon stood beside him, pulling his jacket tighter around his chest. He looked up at the sky, the same sky he always talked about conquering. But tonight, the stars looked so far away, like a reminder of how small humans really were. "You didn't have to do that," Elon said quietly, his voice almost swallowed by the rumble of cars passing by. "You could have just played along." Keanu exhaled smoke, watching it twist into the darkness. "I know," he said softly, "but then I'd just be another man who says nothing when he knows better." Ellen's shoulders dropped. He kicked at a pebble on the sidewalk like a boy who didn't want to go home after school. "You made me look like a villain," he said, almost childlike. Keanu turned to face him, his eyes kind but unflinching. "You're not a villain, Elon, but you're not a saint either. None of us are. You want to save the world, but saving the world starts with seeing the people right in front of you, the ones no one claps for, the ones who build your cars and Sweep your labs and deliver your food when you're working late. Elon didn't know how to argue with that. He leaned back against the brick wall, feeling the rough surface dig into his back. He thought about the countless nights he'd spent staring at screens filled with code. The nights when he felt like a god holding the future in his hands. But Keanu's words cut deeper than any critic's headline. They made him see himself, and the parts he didn't want to see. The streetlight above them flickered, casting shadows on their faces. A young woman pushing a shopping cart full of plastic bottles passed by. Her eyes were empty, her face pale under the harsh glow. Elon watched her, the question on his lips, before he could stop himself. What do you think she'd say if I told her I'm trying to save the world? Keanu looked at the woman as she disappeared into the night. She'd probably say she just wants enough to eat tomorrow. She doesn't care about Mars, Elon. She cares about rent. She cares about her kid getting to school safely. If we forget them, we're not saving anyone. We're just leaving Earth behind for another planet to ruin. Elon's throat felt tight. He didn't want to admit it, but something inside him ached. A strange, uncomfortable ache that made him feel human in a way he hadn't felt for years. Why me? He asked. Why did you have to do this tonight? Keanu dropped the cigarette and stepped on it. He looked at Elon, really looked at him, the way only someone who knew what loneliness tasted like could. Because you listen. Even when you pretend you don't, you listen. And maybe, just maybe, someone needs to remind you that kindness isn't weakness. It's the only thing that can keep this whole thing from falling apart. For a moment, they stood there, two men with the weight of different worlds on their shoulders. The silence between them was honest, heavy, but not empty. A car pulled up to the curb. Keanu's ride. He nodded to Elon, who still looked lost under the streetlight. This doesn't end here, does it? Elon asked, his voice small. Keanu opened the door, but paused, 1 foot inside. No. This is just the start. The real work happens when no one's watching. Elon watched as the car drove away, its taillights shrinking into the night. He felt the chill on his skin, the words still echoing in his mind. For the first time, he wondered if maybe rockets and cars weren't the only things he needed to build. Maybe he needed to build bridges too, bridges back to the people he had stopped seeing. Inside the conference hall, the janitors swept up the confetti that no one would remember. The stage was empty now, but somewhere deep in the shadows, a single piece of paper lay crumpled near the mixed stand. It read, "Don't confuse genius with kindness," and far from the cameras, under the quiet hum of the city, a billionaire and an actor walked away from the same moment, but carried the same truth. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is see people as they are, not as you wish them to be. The night after the broadcast felt different. The clip of Keanu's quiet questions and Elon's silent struggle spread like fire. Through every corner of the internet, news sites played it on repeat, talk shows debated it, and people on the street replayed it on their phones while waiting for their buses. Some called Keanu brave, some called him naive, but almost everyone felt something they couldn't quite name. A tug inside the chest that made them wonder what kindness really meant in a world built by men like Elon Musk. Keanu, though, didn't hide behind the buzz. He woke up early the next morning, long before the sun could bleach the city awake. He stepped out of his small rented apartment, his old boots hitting the wet sidewalk. He needed the city, the noise, the strangers, the faces that didn't care who he was, that didn't look at him like a hero or a villain, but just another soul passing by. It grounded him. It reminded him why he said what he said. In a small corner cafe that smelled of burnt toast and cheap coffee, Keanu sat with his back to the window. His phone buzzed every minute with calls from his manager, from movie studios, from reporters who wanted him to say more. But he didn't. He watched an old couple share a muffin. He watched a young waiter bring them napkins with a shy smile. There was more honesty in that cafe than in any $1,000,000 conference hall. Then, a soft tap on the glass behind him pulled him out of his thoughts. It was a boy, maybe 16, thin arms wrapped in a hoodie too big for his small frame. His hair was a mess. His eyes darted between the cafe door and Keanu's face like he was afraid to come in. Keanu pushed open the door for him and nodded to the empty seat. The boy sat down. his fingers trembling as he held a folded piece of paper. "You're Keanu Reeves," the boy whispered, half statement, half question. Keanu gave him a warm, tired smile. "Sometimes, yeah." The boy took a deep breath. He pushed the paper across the table. It was a printout, a photo of him and his mother standing in front of an old car. In the corner of the photo, the logo of Ellen's car company was barely visible. "My mom worked at the plant," the boy said, his voice cracking. "She built the batteries for those cars. When they got robots to do it faster, she lost her job. We lost our home last year. She's sick now. I watched that thing last night. What you said to Elon. I don't know why, but it made me think. Maybe someone still cares." Keanu didn't say anything for a long moment. He looked at the boy, really looked at him. His skinny hands, the dark circles under his eyes, the hope that flickered there even though life had given him every reason to let it die. He knew that hope well. He carried it once too, when he had nothing but a few bucks in his pocket and a broken heart that the world tried to step on. "What's your name?" Keanu asked. "Ricky," the boy said. "My mom's name is Claire." Keanu nodded. He reached into his coat and pulled out his old notepad, the same one he scribbled on before stepping onto that stage. He wrote down an address, tore the page carefully, and slid it across to Ricky. "This is a friend of mine," Keanu said softly. "He runs a community place. They help people like your mom. They won't ask you for money. Just go there. Tell them Keanu sent you." Ricky stared at the paper like it was gold. His eyes glistened. He wiped his nose on his sleeve. "Why are you helping me?" Keanu smiled. "But it was sad too, because someone helped me once, and because if I don't, what's the point of all this?" Ricky stood up and hugged him, so quick it almost didn't happen. He dashed out into the street before Keanu could say anything else. Keanu sat there, his coffee cold now, the world outside slowly waking up. He knew there were thousands more Rickies out there, thousands more Claires. He couldn't fix everything. He wasn't a hero, but he could see them. He could remind people like Elon to see them. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Elon sat alone in a glass office that touched the clouds. The morning sun spilled across the expensive rug and the white walls lined with photos of rockets and cars and planets, but none of it felt as shiny as it did before. He replayed the clip on his phone, Keanu's voice echoing in that huge silent room. "Do you see them?" Those words wouldn't leave him alone. They clung to him like a shadow. He remembered the janitor who always worked late, so the office could sparkle for the next big meeting. He remembered the cafeteria lady who always smiled but whose eyes always looked tired. He realized he never asked her name. Elon opened his laptop and typed a message to his team. It was a short message, but for him, it felt heavier than any code he'd ever written. "We need to talk. We need to see the people we don't see." He hit send. Then he leaned back, staring at the ceiling like it held answers. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Millions of people just trying to get through another day. For the first time, Elon wondered if his big ideas would mean anything if he didn't do something for the small things. First, somewhere down the hall, a young intern paused outside his office, listening through the glass. She had watched the live broadcast too. She saw the same crack in her boss's armor, and a small part of her dared to believe that maybe things could change. Not because of rockets or cars, but because one man chose to remind another that the people nobody notices are the ones worth fighting for. As the morning turned into day, the world kept spinning, but something tiny shifted. Sometimes that's all it takes. One truth spoken out loud, one boy given hope, one billionaire forced to look in the mirror. Sometimes that's how you start to save a world people keep trying to leave behind. The city's heartbeat felt different in the days after Keanu's words cracked open the shiny surface of Ellen's perfect world. People everywhere talked about that moment, in offices, in crowded buses, in late-night diners where old men sipped bitter coffee. The same question spread like rain on dry soil. What good is genius if it forgets how to be kind? Keanu tried to slip back into his quiet life, but the world wouldn't let him. The media chased him down alleys. His phone kept ringing with requests for interviews, and the people he passed on the street looked at him like he carried a secret they needed to hear. He hated that. He never wanted to be a savior. He just wanted people to see each other again. One rainy afternoon, Keanu found himself standing outside a small community center in a rough part of town. The sign above the door was chipped and faded, but inside, the warmth wrapped around him like a blanket. Kids laughed in a corner, drawing on scraps of paper. Tired mothers sipped tea, their eyes heavy but softer than the cold street outside. Volunteers bustled about, their voices low but kind. Keanu walked through the narrow hallway until he found Claire, Ricky's mother. She sat in a folding chair, her thin hands wrapped around a steaming mug. When she saw Keanu, her eyes widened, a fragile smile breaking through her exhaustion. "I didn't think you'd really come," Claire said, her voice a whisper. Keanu pulled up a chair and sat beside her. "I wanted to see for myself." She told him about the new apartment the center found for them, how Ricky was back in school, how she was learning new skills so she could find work again. Her voice trembled, but there was hope in it, real hope, not the kind sold on a screen by men in suits. Keanu listened, nodding, never interrupting. He knew that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just listen. Outside the window, the rain fell in steady drops, washing the city's dirt into the gutters. Keanu thought about how easy it was for people like Elon to forget this place existed. The men in glass towers never saw the cracked sidewalks, the broken families, the silent prayers whispered into the night by people who felt invisible. They just built things above it all, forgetting that real people lived below. Meanwhile, across town, Elon sat in a private meeting with his top team. The room was spotless, every surface shining like the inside of a spaceship, but the mood was anything but bright. His executives traded nervous glances as Elon leaned forward, his hands clasped tight. "We need to do better," Elon said, his voice low but firm. "We talk about changing the world, but we ignore the people who hold it up. That ends now." One man, older with silver hair and a watch worth more than some people's homes, cleared his throat. "With respect, Elon, what exactly do you mean?" "We have charity programs. We invest in clean energy." Ellen's eyes snapped to him, sharper than anyone had seen in months. "Charity isn't the same as change. Giving scraps to the people you've left behind isn't kindness, it's guilt. We need to rebuild how we treat everyone who makes this company run. Fair pay, real opportunities, safety nets when things go wrong. We can afford rockets, but we can't afford that. Tell me how that makes sense." The room fell silent. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others looked down at their polished shoes. They had built their lives on numbers, charts, profits that soared while real people sank. No one had ever forced them to look at it like this. Elon leaned back. The words felt like stones in his mouth, but he kept going. "I don't know how yet, but we're going to find a way. I want a plan on my desk in 2 weeks, not for investors, not for the cameras, for the people who sweep these floors when we're all gone home." His words rippled through the company in ways no viral tweet ever could. Some mocked him behind his back. Others secretly felt the stirring of something they hadn't felt in years. A belief that maybe work could be more than numbers on a screen. Maybe it could mean something. As the rain turned into a light drizzle, Keanu stepped back into the street outside the community center. Claire hugged him tight, her thin arms surprisingly strong around his ribs. She whispered, "Thank you for seeing us." Keanu just nodded. He didn't know what to say. Thank you felt too small. He walked down the cracked sidewalk, his boots splashing through puddles that reflected the dull glow of streetlights. The city smelled of wet asphalt and distant hope. That night, Keanu sat on his bed, staring at his phone. There was a message from Elon. Simple words, no emojis, no jokes. "I see them now. Thank you. Let's talk soon." Keanu put the phone down and looked out the window. The city hummed below him. Millions of people with stories just like Claire's, just like Ricky's. He knew this wasn't a fairy tale. One conversation wouldn't fix the world. But it was a crack in the wall, a shaft of light through a locked door. Far away, Elon stood by his window too, looking down at the city he had spent years trying to escape, dreaming of Mars, of distant stars. Tonight, though he wondered if maybe the greatest frontier was right here on Earth, buried under all the noise, waiting to be seen by someone brave enough to look, and in that quiet space, between one soul and another, a tiny promise took root, that maybe real genius was not in leaving the world behind, but in choosing to stay, and fix what everyone else forgot. Days turned into weeks, but the echo of that live TV moment didn't fade. If anything, it grew roots, winding through boardrooms, back alleys, homes, and hearts. People who had felt invisible for so long found themselves saying, "Did you see what Keanu said? Did you see how Elon listened?" It became a spark for late night talks between fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, workers and bosses. Some scoffed, calling it a show, but others knew a door had cracked open, and some doors, once open, never closed the same way again. In the middle of it all, Keanu felt both hope and weight pressing on his chest. He had never wanted this, to be a symbol, to be someone's lesson. He just wanted people to remember that money could build rockets, but kindness could build bridges. One afternoon, after hours of reading letters sent by strangers, stories of single mothers, factory workers, kids who felt lost, he decided it was time to meet Elon face to face again. Away from cameras and crowds, they met in a small diner on the edge of the city. No polished glass walls this time, just peeling linoleum floors, flickering neon lights, and the smell of burnt coffee and fried eggs. It was the kind of place where no one cared who you were, as long as you left a tip. Elon was already there when Keanu walked in, sitting at a corner booth, staring into a mug of untouched coffee. He looked different, more human somehow. His hair was messier, his eyes had dark circles, like he hadn't slept enough. But his hands didn't tremble like that night on stage. When he saw Keanu, he stood up too fast, almost knocking over the salt shaker. "You really came," Elon said, almost like a question. Keanu slid into the booth across from him. "You asked." They sat in silence for a moment. The waitress came by, an older woman with tired eyes and a patient smile. She didn't recognize them. She just poured fresh coffee and asked, "Cream or sugar?" Keanu shook his head. Elon asked for 2 sugars but didn't touch the spoon. Keanu finally spoke. "So, tell me." Elon leaned forward, his elbows on the chip table. "I did what you asked. I went to the plant, the one where we let so many people go. I talked to them, really talked, not a staged visit with cameras, just me, walking through the lines. Some wouldn't even look at me. They think I'm just another rich guy who plays God." Keanu listened, nodding slowly. "And what did you see?" Elon's eyes glistened for a moment, but he looked away, blinking it back. "I saw people who gave me their best years. I saw a man named Miguel. He's been sweeping floors there since the first car rolled off the line. He's never asked for anything. He's raising his granddaughter alone now. She wants to be an engineer. She might never get the chance." Keanu let that sit between them. The hum of the diner filled the gaps, the clink of forks, the low murmur of conversations that meant nothing but held everything. Finally, he said, "What are you going to do about it?" Elon took a deep breath. "I want to start with scholarships, real ones, not just for kids at fancy schools, but for families like Miguel's, and healthcare support for workers who get replaced by machines, job training for new roles. It won't fix everything, but it's a start." Keanu felt something warm flicker in his chest. "That's not charity, that's respect." Elon smiled, small and tired. "You know, the day after our live thing, my mother called me. She said she was proud of me for standing there and listening. She said it was the first time she saw me really human in years." Keanu looked down at his coffee, the steam curling into the cold air. "Sometimes we all forget how to be human. The world loves to make us believe we're only worth what we can build or break." For a moment they were just 2 men in a cheap diner. No billionaire, no movie star, no one waiting for them to slip up or say something quotable. Just 2 souls, talking about things most people kept buried deep. The waitress returned, refilling their mugs. She asked, "So, big plans today?" Elon laughed, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah, fixing the world." She chuckled, not realizing he meant it. "Well, good luck with that, honey." When she walked away, Keanu leaned closer. This isn't just about you, Elon. It's not about me either. It's about all of us. What happens when the cameras stop rolling? You're going to get pushed back. People will say you're weak. They'll say you're wasting money. Elon nodded. I know. But after that night, I don't care. It's like you said. Real work happens when no one's watching. Outside the window, the city felt raw but alive. A young woman held her baby tight while waiting for the bus. An old man shuffled past, pulling a cart of bottles. The world didn't feel fixed. Far from it, but it felt seen, even if only a little. Keanu stood, throwing a few bills on the table. He clapped Elon on the shoulder. Don't just say it, do it, and keep doing it. That's how you build something that outlasts rockets. Elon looked up at him, a flicker of something old and childlike in his eyes, wonder, maybe, or hope. I will, I promise. As Keanu stepped outside, the cold air hit his face, waking him up in a way coffee never could. He didn't believe in heroes. He didn't believe one man could save the world. But he believed in cracks, tiny openings that let the light in, even when darkness seemed endless. Behind him, Elon stayed at the window, watching Keanu walk into the busy street. He knew there would be headlines tomorrow. They'd twist this meeting into something flashy, something to sell ads, but they'd never see the truth of it. That two men who could have stayed in their comfortable castles chose instead to sit in a rundown diner and talk about people no one wanted to talk about. And somewhere, in that tiny moment, the world shifted again. Just a little, just enough. Weeks passed, then months. The world did what it always does. It moved on to the next headline, the next scandal, the next bright, shiny thing that stole people's attention for a few days before fading into noise. But somewhere underneath all that noise, a small but powerful ripple kept spreading. It started in places where people felt invisible, in factories, in warehouses, in schools too old to have new paint on the walls. It lived in the stories that people whispered to each other at the bus stop or across kitchen tables late at night. Keanu didn't chase the cameras. He slipped back into his quiet life, the small apartment with peeling paint, the old books stacked by the window, the battered guitar leaning in the corner like a loyal friend. He walked the same city streets every day, blending in with the thousands of people who would never show up on a magazine cover or have 1 million followers hanging on their every word. He liked it that way. It reminded him that the point wasn't the applause, it was the echo. Meanwhile, Elon did something most people didn't believe he would do. He kept showing up. At first, it was small, meetings with workers in break rooms that smelled of stale coffee, listening to their stories, their fears, the things they hid from him for years because they didn't think he'd care. He stood in those rooms without cameras, without polished speeches, sometimes awkward, sometimes defensive, but always there, and each time, the wall between him and the people who made his dreams possible got a little thinner. The media still circled him like sharks, waiting for him to slip up so they could slap a headline on his back. Billionaire loses his edge, genius goes soft. But the people who swept his floors, fixed his machines, packed his parts, they didn't see weakness. They saw a man who finally looked them in the eyes and asked their names. One afternoon, months after that night on live TV, Keanu found himself back at the community center. The same chipped sign above the door, the same warm, busy chaos inside. Claire was there, smiling more now, her eyes brighter. Ricky sat at a table helping younger kids with their homework, his head bent in focus, his face open with the kind of hope that kids like him do often lose to young. Keanu leaned against the doorway, watching them. Claire walked over, wiping her hands on her jeans. You did this, she said softly. Keanu shook his head. No, you did, you and Ricky. You just needed someone to remind you that you mattered. She reached out and squeezed his hand. No more words, none were needed. Sometimes the smallest moments say everything. Later that night, Keanu stood outside under the streetlight as rain started to fall, warm and gentle. He pulled out his old notepad, the one with the first scribbled words that started it all. Don't confuse genius with kindness. He flipped to a fresh page and wrote another line below it, his pen moving slowly. One small act can make the world listen. He didn't know who would read it next, or if anyone would. But he liked the thought of leaving pieces of truth behind, like breadcrumbs for the ones who come after. Far across the city, in a glass office that didn't feel so cold anymore, Elon looked out at the skyline. His reflection stared back. Older, maybe wiser, definitely more tired. But there was something softer in his eyes now. On his desk lay a folder filled with sketches and notes, not for rockets or cars, but for schools, for housing, for training centers and neighborhoods no one bothered to map before. He knew it wouldn't fix everything. Some days he felt like he was bailing out a sinking ship with a cup. But then he thought of Keanu's voice that night, quiet but impossible to ignore, and he picked up the cup anyway. Somewhere deep in the shadows of his memory, he could still hear the applause that followed Keanu's words, but that wasn't what stayed with him. It was the silence that came after, the heavy, beautiful silence when truth settles in, when people see each other again, even if just for a moment, years from now, when the world moved on again, when new geniuses rose and new ideas flew too close to the sun. Maybe people would forget the headlines, but they'd remember the way it felt to be seen by someone who didn't have to see them. They'd remember that even in a world built on metal and money and unreachable stars, kindness still mattered more than all of it. And somewhere, a boy named Ricky would grow up knowing that he wasn't invisible, that his mother's hands, worn and trembling, were worth more than a self-driving car or a rocket to Mars. And maybe he'd tell that story to his own children one day, about the man who built rockets and the actor who asked him to look down instead of up for once, and how that small crack of kindness changed everything. And Keanu, walking through another rainy night with his hands deep in his pockets, would carry that truth with him always, that no matter how loud the world gets, the quietest words, spoken with honesty and love, are the ones that last forever.